I will dominate, and this is Thorin's channel. The guy who, if I keep on associating with him, will get me banned on Twitch eventually.
So if I rewind, I'll ask the question I set up earlier, which is, if I'm in my second year ever in European League, if I'm in FNATIC as well, by the way, the most storied org ever, and we just won both LEC splits and we just went to the final worlds, like every other player in history goes like, right, I'm just going to be a FNATIC player forever now, like 5 years, 3 years, whatever, like build the whole team around me, just get that player, we're going to win worlds next year. How does it come around, Caps, that actually... You obviously you were a free agent. How does it come about that you not only leave, but you go to the main rival? Like in this scenario, some people would say, even if you don't want, I don't know, to play with a specific team, ask them to be kicked. Stay and have them build around you. Again, aside from G2, FNATIC and G2 were basically the best spots to be in theory. Was this off-season enormous? Was it something that was obvious to do? Did you have to think about, were there a lot of options as to what you could have? Give me some thoughts. What was your headspace at this time? Because like I say, I think it was a very big shock to a lot of people that this move happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think I went into the offseason just my initial thought was just to be open-minded, just because like I thought like you never know how a team will change. Or like sometimes like teams that are like maybe perceived worse will do like a big upgrades and they will have like a new philosophy and they will get a lot of strong players. So I kind of came into the answer. I was like, okay, I want to talk with every team, and then I had a few calls, and I realized like, okay, it's not going to be possible to talk with every team because there was like I was talking with both EU and NA teams at the time, and it was it was a lot of teams that I was talking with, and it became too I don't know, like convoluted, or like there's just too many options and too much to think about from each specific team. So I quickly decided to limit it a lot. A lot of the offseason I started also doing with Miki, because if I would go somewhere other than FNATIC, I thought Miki would definitely be the support to go with. And we started doing a lot of the offseason together. And then, in the end, we just ended up with G2. I think, obviously, like going into G2, I had I had a lot of respect for Jankos. I thought he was like probably like one of the best players in Europe at the time. Like I definitely thought he was like very strong. I didn't really have the best opinion of Winther. He seemed kind of toxic, and
he was a bit trolley, right? Sure.
Yeah, and I thought he like as like from a different team, I thought he was good, but it seemed like he also played mainly just like carry champs and didn't really give much space to the carries in the team. And then I think for Perkz, I mean, obviously I already said right, but I had a lot of respect for Perkz. I think him going AD carry was a bit of a flip, but I also trusted him. And then also just to add it right now, before I finish everything about FNATIC, also joining G2, I realized that Winther was way better than I expected.
Right.
Just to not leave that out of the air. Like he was not toxic at all. He was a very, very good teammate. And he was very, very, very good. Like he was for sure the biggest positive surprise I could have ever imagined. So definitely big shout out to him, right? But it was just my initial thought of him going into the offseason, right? And to go back on FNATIC, I think that it was definitely a hard choice to make, because at the end it ended up with G2 or FNATIC, which team would I want to join between them. And I think that that's I would have been happy to go for another year with FNATIC, but at the same time I felt like there was too much stuff that I didn't I guess happening. And when I was listening to the FNATIC, and I think it was Youngbuck as well, I was talking a lot about the vision of the next year. I didn't really agree with that too much. I didn't find my spot on that. I felt I also kind of had the feeling that sure we did very well, but I also felt like we kind of peaked in a way.
Right.
I think we got quite fortunate with a lot of things, and just the view on the game in our team felt a bit there was a lot of conflict between that. So I felt and then I just felt I might as well try, because I really want to win worlds, and it's of course we could also do it with FNATIC, but I felt the chance was kind of low. So I felt now I will just kind of send it in a gambit. I had talked a lot with Perkz the last 2 years or so, after Season 7 as well, when they lost in groups, he was joined us for a day or something, and
right.
I was also talking a lot with him, and I think in terms of the game, we agreed on a lot of things, and he both taught me a lot, but also he was just very, like-minded, I guess, and it's also just a mid lane thing, maybe the
Right.
being like-minded. But that for sure gave me some comfort in like, yeah, in just having someone that is like on the same page to that extent. So I just went for it.
Right, look, it's 5 years since you originally joined, so I'm sure the statute of limitations must have passed, and we can talk a little bit about this. But basically, even though, look, if anyone from Riot's listening, yeah, of course, everyone always contacts the team when someone's under contract and asks, can I talk to that player who's under contract, because otherwise anything else would be against the rules and poaching, and no one would ever do that. But let's imagine, hypothetically, Caps, that actually Perkz is notorious for being able to have these conversations in an informal manner with people, where let's say he expresses an idea and incepts into their mind that maybe we should play together, and hence everyone jokes he's secretly the best GM in Western League of Legends, right? Obviously, I'm trolling when I say that, but there's sort of some truth here, right? Was it actually the case? Was he actually one of the ones who directly came with this idea of like an I'll roll swap? Because that sounds like some wacky movie idea, Craps. The idea that, like, especially the idea later on the next year, you guys like swapped back for a split as well. That's even more ridiculous. That sounds like you're fucking trolling. Like, when he came with this idea, did you think he was serious when he was like, look, for real, I'll be ADC and you'll be mid lane? Did it not seem like that's really, like, are you going to stick with that? Did it not seem like a crazy idea to do?
I mean, like, I guess it seemed kind of crazy, but at the same time, I think I had like seen him, especially in in-houses. I guess now I don't want to go on like a mega story, but back then people were playing a lot of in-houses in the offseason. I guess we still are, but back then there was a lot more tunnel vision. There was mainly LEC players, which meant that there was a lot of off-rolling, and there was always way too many mid laners. So it would often end up with, and me and Perkz were always playing, so it was like we were always in the game basically, and he would play a lot of AD carry, I would also play some AD carry. So I had like seen him play like that before against like other LEC AD carries, and like maybe it wasn't like the best in the world, right, at the time, but he definitely was like holding his own to some extent. And I think it was definitely like a very big question mark as well, like him going AD carry. Like I hadn't really like seen people roll swap that much, I guess, in my time, but
sure.
You know, I like at the same time, I guess Jess also came from coaching and went back to support and had been mid lane, so there was a little bit of precedent for it there. And you know, when you just trust the player and you have talked a lot with him throughout the years, then yeah, I guess I just trusted him, right? Of course, it also came with like I think a big selling point was also Jankos at the time, especially because he was just like very, very good. There's very few people that like I play against. I'm like, oh, I know this guy mentally, you know.
Right.
But he was definitely one of them. So it was a big reason as well.
By the way, along these lines, I want to refer back to something I talked about at the beginning of the interview about your relationship with your dad in this sense. Because one thing it has been publicised. I said it actually to Carlos in my reflections I did with him like last year. But a lot of people won't know the story, Caps. I heard that when you were coming to join this team in this off-season, like I just said earlier, look, if Perkz came to me and was like, hey, bro, join the team, like I'll roll swap, part of me would be like, whoa, what happens if you decide you want to go back though? Like what happens then? Like I don't want to be the guy where it's like, what do I have to play ADC now? I've heard like basically your dad asked this question and basically Carlos or G2 told him, like, look, if you join, we promise the mid lane spot is yours. Like, even if Perkz says, I want to come back, we won't just take it from you and go, you know, like, Perkz is our man and, you know, he gets the spot. Give me some thoughts on this. Like, was this a big deal to you? It sounds like, but like, what I'm trying to also establish is your dad isn't just a guy spamming weird emojis on Twitter, which he is, but he's also like taking way more of like a hands-on role probably than people know in your career, right? He's trying to it looks like he's trying to like take care of you, mate, and keep you safe.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think a lot of it came from there as well. Was just like that my parents and like even my family and stuff like this had like a very bad like read on G2 because it's like
Okay,
obviously it was like the rival of FNATIC and
Sure.
they were changed from FNATIC the last 2 years. So they were like naturally just like against FNATIC to some extent, but also because of like the whole like samurai and it looked like kind of evil and like
Okay, all right.
I think
okay.
like, the thing is I think they don't necessarily understand everything that goes on in the game, right?
Okay.
But they might see a bit more like the people and the team, and of course the G2 logo and stuff can look a bit scary. Yeah, I think they saw it like that, and then like Carlos can definitely come off as like quite like a villain, something like that.
Yeah, some would say he plays up to it. Yeah, exactly.
So they were like not they were not super happy about me joining. To be fair, right? And I think also when the contract, I think they were very worried that like G2 would get me and then they would just bench me and they would be like, now we got rid of the competition, kind of.
Sure.
That was like a big thing. And then the other thing would be that if Perkz went back to mid lane, right? So I think like at the time I of course knew like Perkz and G2 at like as a little bit better. I mean, of course I didn't know them that well, but like at least Perkz I talked with quite a lot, and I didn't really think of this to that extent. Maybe I should have. Like probably I should have. Right? I think it's always good to cover yourself in that sense, because you never know like if things change. Right? People change, things can change. So I think it was a good thing. But I think there was definitely something like, I think it was basically, I don't remember exactly, but there was something in my contract that like if Perkz wanted to go back to mid, then it would like release my contract or something like this. At least I think there was something like that. But I think it was also only like for like the first part of like the first year or so of my contract. So it was not like, basically I don't think I minded too much, and I think G2 mainly just put it in for my dad to feel good about it, because he was definitely very like upset with him. He wanted to join G2, and I also think Perkz also talked with him, which was also like I think went quite well, because I think he had a good talk with him.
Fair enough. That's how good Perkz is. He can even talk to people's families and win them over now. This guy was supposed to be the master. Okay. Yeah. By the way, along those lines, one thing I do want to ask is this. Even though at the time when Perkz made that role swap to go to ADC, I remember myself thinking, like, it's one thing to role swap and just be like a normal player in LEC. He's trying to role swap on like the best team as well. But I have to say, Caps, I actually went this year, and I was doing an article where I was looking up what Western players had like really good games against like the best Asian teams from like LPL and LCK. Bro, it's actually insane how many games when he was ADC he had in that like year and a half. Like he had so many like massive carry games too. Like he wasn't even just like a player. He was actually like, look, he maybe wasn't like traditional ADC, but in some ways, like in the game, he was still really good at League of Legends, right? How would you say he played? He had quite an unusual style, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think, I think going into the first split, I remember that like Mickey and Perkz were not really on the same page a lot of the time. I feel like Mickey had to like bring Perkz up to date, I guess, and also at the same time Perkz had like his own ideas and some stuff that maybe they could innovate a bit. So the first split was like a little bit shaky. I mean, it also didn't help that like Mickey ended up being subbed out because of the wrist injury and stuff. Like obviously that makes it a lot more difficult. But I think after that, like starting MSI and going into summer, it felt like he really took over a lot of things. Like I think he started like when he got his comfort pick and he got his like comfort strategy, he was able to come up with some very good strategies that like basically just won us a game, right? And I think that is like crucial for a good player is like a great player, I guess, is to come up with a strategy and have it actually win us games. And he had a lot of those, and they were very strong, right? Especially I think whenever they got the Syrakan and stuff like that, he would just be performing super well on them. And then of course he had like the flexibility with like some mages coming in here and there, and I definitely think he played super well even throughout a lot of different metas. I mean, everyone will of course remember like I get a lot of the Syrakan and the Kai'Sa from season 9, but I also think he played like a solid like the Ashe and the Jhin and like the
next year, yeah, he got better on him, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because that was like to cover it, that was like a very different style, right? Where it's not like super hard carry where Jankos is ganking a lot. It was more like setting up Jankos to succeed, and not just for Perkz, but also for us as a team and Jankos. It was like a very big change. So I was super impressed with how I guess both of them handled that whole situation.
And as you say, obviously, this was like arguably when people think Jankos was in his prime, and you two seemed like you just, put it this way, you two almost seemed like from the first game you were just on the same page. I mean, if we think about how I contrasted Broxah earlier, that maybe Broxah was more of like a follower, he just follows up what you do. I've heard that people who've played with Jankos tell me he's the guy where it's more like he just already is doing what you'd want him to do anyway. And you're like, what the fuck? How did he read my mind or something? How did he know to be there? Or like how this fight was going to take? I've heard he's like the best cover jungler. What would you say about him as a player to play with?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was like I think he was for sure the strongest jungler like in season 9, season 10. Like I think right from the get-go I could feel like he was just playing very well, right? And he was very good at like listening and trying to understand like how I see the game. And like if there was something that was like a bit like weird about it, he would comment on it, of course. But a lot of the time he would just know how to follow up on that or set it up for a lot of success. So yeah, I mean, he was just very good. And as you said, like he knew where to be. I think joining G2, like in FNATIC, we were very confident in our macro, and then we had a lot of like knowledge that came from especially Youngbuck. But I realized that when I joined G2, a lot of that knowledge came from not just Youngbuck, but also from the previous G2. So like a lot of this, so we actually had a lot of the same concepts, and like we would have certain names even for them, but they would be like the same names exactly. So you realize that, okay, it's just like there was a lot of things that they agreed on as a team. So that also made it kind of easy, because we had 2 new players, but at least for my part, a lot of what they said I already like had like some understanding of. And especially, I mean, when you go to the point that like concepts have the same name, then then it's like yeah, it's basically the same.
By the way, one thing I want to ask is, in light of the fact you have that crazy like origin story that you had that clip against Faker when you were just some nobody guy in solo queue and you were like, take his Riven. It's kind of wild to me, dude, that like if we skip forwards not that many years, you were playing Faker at MSI where you guys obviously won. And I've heard, again, I went back and watched one of these videos. I heard you guys weren't even scrimming T1. So in theory, you actually had no way to know that we're actually going to be better than them or that we could beat them right now. Like, and also at the end of the day, the other players are going against whoever. You're going against Faker head to head. Was that a big moment, that MSI semi-final for you? Because I think you outplayed him in that series, mate. I think you had an awesome series, right?
Thank you. I mean, there was definitely like gigantic, right? I think like Faker is like my favorite player of all time. So
yeah, if people don't know, that's not trolling. You really were somebody who used to watch him all the time, right? This is the guy who was studying the most, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And also just like, I didn't really follow esports, or like, I was also just like, I mean, I played since season 1, but from season 1 to season 3, I was basically like, between like silver and gold or something like this, and I was just playing kind of casually. I didn't actually care about League, but when I saw Faker win World Season 3, it was during like it was around like my summer vacation, I think, or it was like around this time. I just started spamming the game, and from like literally 6 months, I went from gold to challenger. So it was like, yeah, I got a lot of inspiration from him, and basically since watching Faker win Season 3 World, I spent like all my free time just playing solo queue. Before I would just play with my friends, right? Like play rank 5s, or I would go outside, but that stopped kind of. So I would just play League all day.
Is that part true though, that you guys never even scrimmed them? So you were just going in blind and you just beat SKT in a best of 5? That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think MSI, like how MSI works is just, it's very short. Like it's like you maybe are there like a few days before. So we didn't. It could be correct that we didn't scrim T1. I think at Worlds it was a little bit weird as well, because we scrimmed mainly Damwon was like the thing everyone knows about. We got stunned by Damwon, right? But that was because they were there for play-ins, so we got to scrim them a lot. And we did bootcamp in Europe, they did bootcamp in Korea, so it was the same where they just came for the tournament, and then the tournament's playing, so you're not really scrimming. And then technically we could have played them in quarterfinal, like scrimmed them during the quarterfinal, but I think we didn't. We scrimmed probably. I'm not sure, maybe FNATIC or something. And yeah, I don't think we scrimmed them at Worlds either. But again, going back to our scrims, I think the season 9 and 10 G2, our scrims were very like not the greatest, to be honest. I think in general we had very bad win rate. I mean, everyone knows that or like most people I guess would know that we got like stumped by Damwon, but I think even just in general throughout most of the years we were just losing to most of the Asian teams, and we would even go like 50-50 against most European teams. I think our best scrims were probably season 10 Worlds, which is also why I'm so sad that we lost Damwon, because that was like the 1 week. I remember the week beforehand, or like the weeks beforehand, there was the one time where we were actually like doing very well against LPL LCK with that lineup.
Nice.
We were like doing very well and winning most of our scrims, maybe like going 5-1, 4-2, and it felt very one-sided as well. Like it felt like most of the games we were just doing well in the game. Whereas like season 9, before we played against T1, for example, we were getting completely stumped by both IG and FPX, and we were just getting like completely smashed every game. And same with Damwon right before, like basically that whole World season 9, we were just getting stumped by everyone in scrims. And then it's like we went against Damwon, we're like, oh, we got stumped against some scrims, we will win, and then we won. Then we didn't scrim against T1, but they were obviously super strong. And we won, and we hoped the same would happen against FPX, but yeah, sadly not.
By the way, at this Worlds you're talking about, where you had the 2 series against the Koreans, you had the Damwon quarterfinals and then the semi-final against T1. If people remember, the semi-final was the one where the team did that amazing. Even though you thought of it on the fly, as far as I could tell, you just traded the tower for the fucking dragon every time, which bizarrely, actually, it turned out sort of almost worked. Like almost was cost efficient. Like it actually was an approach. Even though, by the way, spoiler, you can't do it now. Sadly, they took it out of the game because that's right, it's free and whatever. But this approach, right? What I want to ask was this, Caps. If the story goes that actually no one thought we were winning this World because we're doing badly in scrims, scrims. In fact, we're even getting wrecked by the Korean teams. Does that imply something is special about that lineup in like an official match though? Does it mean there's like a special, I don't know, like presence, like people just don't choke or something? What did that lineup have some special quality, do you think, in a real game?
I mean, I just to go back, I don't think any of us probably wouldn't win Worlds, actually. Like, sure, we're losing every game, but at the same time, I think our whole mindset throughout a lot of Season 9 10 was like, definitely that there's a difference between scrims and stage.
Right.
And I think, like, going up first time against, like, Damwon, we knew that they were like a bit of a new team, right? So we definitely felt like they could lose to the nerfs. And they could do some damage to them in that sense. And going up against T1, I mean, we did just beat them the previous MSI, so we still had like some confidence there. And while we were getting stumped by FPX, we still had like confidence that we could take them down, right? I think that I think they were just like a bit too strong for us at the end, and we maybe did some mistakes on the day, but like a different day, maybe we could have taken them down.
I saw you did an interview where I feel like, unless I'm misremembering, I'm almost certain the headline was like, I wake up thinking about the FPX final or something. It was some line like that. The reason I want to ask about this is because it's one thing to just lose a match. Like, you lost to IG, okay, they just beat you straight up. The thing I've always felt like a lot of people in G2 regret about this FPX final is just that, like, you know, now the kids use that term cooking. You guys overcooked those drafts. Like, the problem is, I'm pretty sure you wish you could just go back and just play like a normal game and then just see how that would go, right? Because the problem is, even the first game's like, oh, holy fuck, we've mega overcooked this. Because you want to know what would happen if you just played a normal 5v5 or something, right? Don't you think it was kind of a bit edgy, the fucking angle taken? What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, when you're like at these like super stressful events, and I mean, especially when you're like having very poor scrim results and nothing feels like it's working, you end up with these draft meetings where like, no matter which way it goes, it feels like we'll just lose it, because that's what we've been experiencing in scrims. And I think whenever these scrim meetings happen, like these meetings happen, it always feels a bit cursed, like the draft afterwards, because it's like, yeah, I don't know. We've had it a few times, and every time the result is just kind of bad. And it also feels awkward in the moment, because of course you need to agree to something, and you can't just like, it's very easy to say like, oh, but you shouldn't think too much of the results. But of course you should think about like how your scrims are going, because that's like what you're winning with and losing with, right? So you need to take it into account, but you need to also have it make sense. It's very difficult, and especially as I said, when it's like your life is on the line, and well, not literally, but basically,
sure.
and you're losing a lot. It can get very, very weird. And I think, you know, with a fresh mind, like a week later, you know, when you get a fresh mind, you can be like, oh, why didn't we do all these things we were so good at? Or like, why didn't we put them into a corner here? Or like, why didn't we do these things in-game differently as well? Because there was also many, many things that were very obvious in hindsight, I guess, of like either patterns that FPX did or patterns that we did we should have kept doing. And it feels like a shame that we missed it in the moment, but you know, that's just life. And also just to couple on, like I have heard this from someone, I guess it was in G2 or something, but basically when we won against T1, FPX was just like super chanting, and they were cheering because yeah, at the time we were getting stumped, and I guess they must have been probably getting stumped by T1, or at least like doing a lot, like T1 was doing a lot better against them.
Right.
So that yeah, I also feel bad we didn't get to prove them wrong.
Along these lines, so I did want to ask specifically, just like I asked about Rookie, in that case, I wonder how is it to play against Doinb, because people don't know, even though in later years he was even an LPL MVP eventually, he was actually mechanically quite strong in later years. But this is the Doinb that was kind of like a weird sort of gimmicky player, and it almost felt to me like you're not playing him, you're playing like his team, if you know what I mean. What's it like to actually play against this guy? He seemed like quite an unusual mid laner at the time, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, just in general, like now I said before about Ning and Rookie working together. I think a lot of the LPLTK teams, they just worked better as like between the lanes and between the jungle and stuff like this as like a team.
Right.
I think in a lot of the Western teams are kind of just doing their own thing, like not solo queue, but not far from it either. At least back then. And I think they were one of the first teams to like really put support jungle and mid together and just like take over the map. And I think Doinb was very decisive, and he played like a lot of setup champs, whether it be like the Nautilus or the Kled or the Ryze, where he just sees someone, he just goes on that champion, his support jungle is there, they will die because they are alone, right? Because no one else was really really grouping up to the same extent. So I think it just again comes from them being one step ahead. But at the end of the day, that's what it takes to win Worlds, right? A lot of times they just one concept better, or like one thing people didn't really do as much, or as crisp on. I guess we also play against Chris, but aside from that, they were just quite good.
What about then? Obviously, you're the only one on G2 though, where this was your second Worlds in a row that you'd had the loss in the finals. How do you take that? Because on paper, look, the teams you've lost to, some of these will be the best teams of all time, and they all say decorate Hall of Fame players. You're not losing to any bad players there, but on paper, like if you have if you're there once, you might go, I hope I'm there again next time. If you're there twice in a row, part of you is probably like, I should have won once, right? How do you handle being in 2 finals and not winning?
Yeah, I mean it was tough for sure. I think the AD carry swap kind of like was maybe a way of dealing with it to some extent.
Right.
Like it was definitely a way of getting in some fresh air that I think was very needed. I think at the end of the day it was probably quite clutch that we swapped around, because I think it could have gotten a bit stale. And I think sometimes it's important to keep things fresh in the team, especially when you're keeping the same like roster and staff and everyone. I think doing something to make it fresh was nice, but it was tough. I think, of course, losing season 8 was also annoying, but season 9 was even worse. And for me, the worst was for sure the season 10. Like even though we didn't make final, but losing that semi-final. Again, maybe that also comes back to what I said before with our scrims were going better, and I felt like in some way, I was like, this is finally the time we do it. And then when we dropped the ball there, I think that was probably the toughest like Worlds loss I've had, because I think going into season 11 and even to a bit of season 12, I felt like I wasn't really myself anymore. I lost a lot of the confidence. There was this whole thing where I swapped with the P on the caps, right, with my name, but that was in season 12, right? But it just like I was just losing a lot of confidence, and it felt like I kind of lost the vision of how to win Worlds, and like lost the belief in it for sure. I think that fortunately I end up like regaining it, which I guess is another story. But basically, it's like sometimes it comes and goes. But that season 10 loss, and I guess all the losses that had been accumulated before that were quite difficult. And I think now I'm at a way better spot of dealing with losses and trying to see the bright side, or like, I mean, not necessarily the bright side, but just like the next step.
Right, I've got a way to frame a question here to make it not an awkward question, because spoiler, I'll cut to the chase. The question's basically going to be like, is Cap secretly the chosen one of Western League of Legends? But that's a mental question to ask anyone, because who can answer that without seeming like some insane cartoon character? So I'll ask it in a reasonable manner. So since right now, we just had a famous player, Maple, from formerly the LMS, Taiwan, retire, right? Most people would understand. There've been plenty of good mid laners in the LMS and in the PCS, etc. But people know that like Maple has a career where he's done a lot of things other players from that region have never done. He's kind of like the one guy that if you were making a team from that region, you want him to have the best shot, you put Maple on the team. Most people would say the same about Caps, right? If I ask someone, make a Western super team now to win Worlds, you're actually one of the only players where there's not that much debate. People aren't really going to be like, maybe I want Jojo here. Like most people are going to go, right, for mid, Caps, and then they're going to argue the other ones. Do they want Hylissang or Mickey X, or do they want, Bunder or Soaz? Depends what era we're talking about, right? After you made these 2 finals back to back, I feel like that's where this was established, that people were like, Caps isn't just good, he's like the chosen one of the West. He's the only one. If we want to win Worlds, it has to be him, right? Does Caps ever buy into this? Do you feel like you're a unique player? Are you just a good player? Look, it's nothing wrong with it. Are you a transcendent player in the West? Is there something special about you compared to other players? What would you say?
I mean, I guess, that is a bit of a loaded question for sure. Yeah. I think that I believe, like, I want to win Worlds, and I think I can do it. It's been a lot of years of failing now, but I still believe in it. And I think a lot of people don't believe that. So in that sense, I think I'm for sure unique.
I think even when you say it, bro, I think even when, like you said recently in an interview, your dream is still to win Worlds because of fake. I think a lot of people sort of, they roll their eyes and they go, oh, it's not possible, don't they? They think no one could win from the West, right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And I mean, when also just like compared to like, now I guess I can go back to school, right? Like comparing my life to a lot of how my friends were living, because I mean, I was good friends with them, but it was obviously like a bit of an obsession to some extent. Like we would, as soon as I would go home, I would play like the 6 hours of scrim, which was basically my whole day at that point with school and stuff. And it's definitely like a very different life, but it's also kind of what you need to do if you want to be the best. And I've of course grown up with like a league to some extent, right? I was watching a lot of league after I mentioned with Faker, and I was always kind of like not sure why why the West was always losing, but something that I like saw in like a lot of interviews, and when people were talking about it, it would be a lot of like the work you put in, like how much you play, like the LPL, the SK players, they play like put in so many hours, and meanwhile the Western players are not putting that in. That was like a lot of the reasons that I got. So I've just always tried to be the guy who puts in those hours and make sure that I give it my all, right? Which is also why it felt, of course, a bit worse like when I joined FNATIC initially, and it was like not everyone was on the same page to that extent. But yeah, I can say all I want, but I still haven't won Worlds, right? So it's like I haven't actually done the job. I've gotten close. I've gotten closer than most, but I don't think 13-year-old Caps who saw Faker win Worlds would be happy with what I've accomplished so far. I think he wants me to take that next step, and he wants me to win Worlds. So until that happens, I think it's it's all words. I just have to actually get the job finished.
I do think it is key, though. I believe you. Like, a lot of people might say the words like "I plan to win Worlds." A lot of them just say that because they know it's what fans want to hear. You believe, whether it's delusional, you believe it or not, right? You believe it's possible, right?
I mean, for sure it's possible. Like even just this Worlds, like I think. I mean, I guess now I'm gonna start going into that, but I think like seeing BLG and T1 make the World Final and us really feeling like we had some competitive games against them, and I was like, if I had just done like this little bit thing better, if I had known like one concept more, if I had been a bit more sharp on the day, then it would be T1 or BLG getting kicked out in groups. But instead, like here we are, right?
Right. By the way, since you did do that crazy role swap, here's the question I have. Was it actually for real at the beginning? Was it totally good faith? Like if it had really worked, you would have played the whole year as ADC. It wasn't just like, we'll see after one split, we'll go back. For real, it could have just been Perkz mid lane from then on and you ADC. If it had gone perfect, that was real.
Yeah, I think, that was at least my interpretation of like role swapping to ADC. Obviously, I think the fact that MSI wasn't there was also like a big change, I guess. Because even if MSI was actually there, then I would have played ADC at MSI, right?
Oh, right. Did you want to test yourself out? You never got a chance to see what it would be like, right?
Yeah, I mean, just how could things have been different, right?
Yeah,
like maybe we would win MSI there, and it would actually feel good because, I mean, I guess a lot of it for me was like I swapped to AD carry, right? And we agreed to make it like to do that. But me as a player, I've never really I like AD carries as a champion, but I never really liked bot lane. Like I never really liked AD carries bot because I like solo lane, I guess, if that makes sense. And as a player, I've always queued mid top. So in that sense, I'm always a bit different than Perkz because he actually likes AD carry a lot, and he was usually queuing its secondary. So when I role swapped, it was definitely a bit of a Hail Mary, or like of a shot. And obviously I still had a lot of respect for Perkz as a mid lane as well, so I thought he would do very well, and I mean he also did. But then when I played it, and I had played it for maybe like half of the split or something, me and Perkz were talking quite a bit, like just throughout the thing, and he was helping me. But I realized like, okay, this is like, I mean the biggest thing for me actually was the solo queue. Like I think AD carry in solo queue, it's pain. Like that's the only way I can explain it. It was. I love solo queue and I play a lot of solo queue, but when I was playing AD carry, I just couldn't do it. Like I could not sit and play solo queue all day playing AD carry. It was too difficult for me. I didn't find the enjoyment from it, so I just had to resort to other things. Like I was doing a lot more VOD reviews. I was a lot more with my team in like doing like other activities, I guess, because before I would usually just play a lot of solo queue, but it was just too difficult. But then I also have said since then that, like, for example, in playoffs, that was probably my favorite, like, playoffs ever. That's what I've said, because I think playing AD carry in, like, a competitive environment where everyone is trying to make things work, and everyone, again, what I mentioned earlier, where everyone is desperate to make it work, where everyone is really willing to sacrifice and give it that extra thing. Not where it has to be perfect, but just get the job done. I think that felt, like, insane as an AD carry, right? We ended up playing a lot of, like, the Yuumi supports, like the Janna supports, and like it went from I was getting dove a lot of times to like getting cover on the dives and stuff like this, and suddenly it felt like the game was like it just like super free. Like I felt so strong, I could like watch it everyone, and I don't know, it just felt very fun to do, and it felt very rewarding because it was way more like I was way more reliant on my team in a way, But then it also felt more rewarding when it suddenly worked out super hard, because it felt like we were together about this in a way bigger extent than when like a lot of the times I played mid lane. So it's like I love that part of it, but I think the solo queue was just too tough. And I think the regular season game, where it feels like sure, we cared about the regular season games and we want to win them, but they didn't have like. But as again, people were not desperate, right? I was not desperate, my team was not desperate, and they just felt bad to play in to the same extent. And I would have loved to play MSI, because again, as I mentioned, it could have been another one where it's like everyone wants to really make it work. And if that had worked out, maybe things would have been different. But maybe they would also been different, like in a worse way, right?
Sure.
It could have been I played AD carry in summer and we just missed playoffs or something, like so. Because we almost did anyway. So like, yeah, it's probably for the better.
Right, at the time we released this interview, I'll already have published a video where I'm going to tell some stories behind the scenes about Rekkles, right? So I have a question along these lines, though, Caps, which is, it's up to you what you say, though. Again, you're free to say whatever you want, mate. Here's the thing. When you tell that story from this split when you were AD carry, which, by the way, is a great story in itself. It could be in a fucking shonen manga anime where, you know, like Caps goes to sleep. They're supposed to lose to FNATIC in the finals. And then, like in the Bible or something, a dream comes to him of, like, this draft where he can play the kog-lulu. Right, look, that may all well be true, because he did play this usual matchup and it did win. But I've heard there's another detail, Caps, which maybe at the time shrewdly you didn't say, which is I've heard because you played with Rekkles, you actually knew, though, something quite unique about at the time how he thought about the champion pool. And I heard that basically you knew something that, like, if we ban these things, the only response he will pick is like Tom Kench and Aphelios or something, whatever. I think that's what they used to play in the bot lane at the time in this FNATIC team. And somehow you actually knew that if we just do like this draft, essentially, he'll have to. I know him well enough to know he'll sort of opt into this, and he did. That's what they did in the first two games. It's kind of like bot diffed them a little bit, right? So, what would you say to that? Like at the time, look, I get why you can't go like, look, I actually just know something secretly about that guy, because then he's going to know, isn't he? Like you have to keep it. Is it true? Is some of this true? Did he kind of like? Did you sort of playing chess in your mind of like what he would do or something, right? But it worked. It kind of you got the right read on him, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the read we had on that in that final was very crazy, because I feel like we predicted like their 3 bans and then like first 3 basically.
Yeah.
So we predicted like so many of their picks and bans, which is like kind of unheard of, I think, at least nowadays.
It's crazy, yeah.
And I think, I mean, for sure, a lot of it comes of like knowing FNATIC and also knowing Rekkles. I also think, to be honest, I mean, I can go back and check, but I'm pretty sure it was just kind of the meta in Europe at the time, where it was like, if you had Aphelios, you had to have like a peel support, you know?
Yes.
And
I think it was Tom Kench or Thresh back there, right? These are the two people always picked,
exactly,
right?
Yeah. And I think in this game we basically banned the Thresh, so they like we thought they would go for the Tam Kench. So I think maybe with Tam Kench or Braum, I guess, which both of them are quite like not the best for sure against the Lulu, right? So it was definitely a very like predictive draft, and I think also I've come across a lot of it comes from like knowing FNATIC and knowing Rekkles, and also having like in a way we had the good way of coming from the lower bracket, which means they came from the upper bracket winning everything. So it was like, of course they will just keep doing a lot of the same things,
right?
And that's also like knowing FNATIC, right? Like they feel confident that they can finally beat G2 doing what they've always done, but the problem for them was just that we were a very different team from the start of the players when we lost to Mad Lions. Like we completely 180'd like everything, right? And changed so many things. So yeah, it was a fun playoffs. That's all I can say.
By the way, in these years where famously it always was FNATIC, except for the first one against Origin, it always was FNATIC that was the opponent in the finals. And in fact, they often had a lot of close games or chances to win. I feel like when people look now, they make it too simplistic. Like they think like, oh, G2 was just way better and they never would have lost. For me, when you have matchups like that where one person keeps winning, actually often what changes it is just the fact that early on you get a streak going. I always felt like if they'd have won, like the famous one was obviously the Season 9 Summer one with all those like 5th gate. If they'd have won even one of these series, it could have made things different, right? It could have changed like their mentality, because I feel like even they now talk as though they never could have won. Like this team was a very good team, FNATIC, right, in these years.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that's. I think what you say makes a lot of sense. Especially like it also comes back to what we've said. We lose to Worlds, right? And to shake things up a bit, we world swap. But it could be the similar if we had lost to FNATIC. Suddenly we have like less confidence going up against them to some extent, right? Or it can also be stuff like, as again I mentioned, our scrims were very bad, or like at least from for the level of team we were, our scrims were not the best, and that's something that people like we kind of just joked about, right? And it's like, oh, we didn't really mind. We were very like happy a team and very like good mooded, well spirited team, but everything also kind of just mostly worked out for us. So it's like, what happens if we start losing a lot of these things, and suddenly maybe someone has a problem with that, like we're losing all these scrims, or maybe someone has a problem that there's like about the mood. And I think to some extent that was also what happened to a bit in season 11, is that like suddenly all these like habits we had, or all these things that we thought were just like fine or good even, suddenly they got question marked, right? And suddenly you don't have the confidence because you're question marking everything instead of just like having a lot of confidence in what you're doing.
Dr. Dre had NWA, DMX had the Rough Riders, and who is the crew holding me down, supporting me when necessary? It is, of course, my Patreon subscribers, the Skrilluminati. So this video, along with all the others on my channel, is kindly supported by Matt Pugnaccio Racula, Animosity, Bane Diesel, Jason, Jensen Gore, Tosh, Toucan, and you know who a special thanks goes out to, because it's always my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to find out who are going to be the guests on future interview episodes? Do you want to know who the guests are on my talk shows? Or maybe you'd like to suggest a topic or a guest? Perhaps you even want to take part in one of those lengthy, tailored to you discussions around esports that I do with the top tier donators. If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, then put your money where your mouth is. Support me and join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link where in the description box below.